Since the early days of humanity, communication has always been something that keeps evolving, from speaking with symbols and shapes, until we learn to turn those shapes into words. Nowadays, it has become our own vast personal catalog of ways to converse with others. But words can not only serve as a means to express oneself to another, but also to create stories, myths, and urban legends that when materialized onto the blank canvas of paper can become real. Here in Night Springs. Tonight's episode, The Writer.
I keep writing. Outside, there's only darkness. Outside this building, outside the script, there's only darkness. I can feel it getting closer with every page. There is something lingering nearby. I can't see it, but I can feel it. It feels like there's guiding me as I write, but I don't know if I should trust it. I need to finish the script. This video will come true. If I stop, everything will be lost. From crafting games in their parents' basement to becoming one of the most prestigious gaming studios, Remedy has a truly inspiring story, with passionate developers striving to create games that not only people will love to play, but also themselves. Remedy has come a long way. Achieving the level of praise it received for Alan Wake 2 required making many mistakes and learning from them. Watching the video of Sam Lake, Remedy's creative director, discussing how they were unable to continue Alan Wake's sequel due to the poor sales at the time is truly heartbreaking. However, 13 years have passed and we are here now revisiting this title. The one that initiated the Remedy Connected Universe, which still maintains a growing fanbase despite its initial poor sales. Alan Wake is a cult classic, but how does it hold up 13 years later after its release? Join me as we journey through Bright Falls and uncover the mysteries in our next game on our Alan Wake's Retrospective. When Remedy's first game was in development, Dietrich Yarvaletto needed someone to write text for it, and the only person he knew at the time who could do that was none other than Sam Lake, who got his first job in game writing by crafting some text for their game, Death Rally. After that, the team tried to figure out the next project until they finally had the idea of creating one of Remedy's most iconic games, Max Payne, a high-octane action game with a story written by the coffee lover himself. Due to the tight budget they had back then, they came up with the idea of using a comic-style book storytelling approach, complemented by narration from the legendary James McFree, thus creating the iconic Max Payne atmosphere.
They were all dead. The final gunshot was an exclamation mark to everything that had led to this point. I released my finger from the trigger, and then it was over.
Max Payne received a sequel, but the team struggled under pressure to match the success of the first one. As the sequel was released, they began to yearn for something new, something fresh. It took the team years to play with various concepts and ideas, which eventually formed the foundation for Alan Wake. The initial concepts for the game revolved around creating an action thriller with deeper storyline that delved into the characters, adding multiple layers to the plot. Additionally, they toyed with the idea of structuring the game like a TV show, which led to its episodic format, drawing heavy inspiration from the works of Stephen King and David Lynch, particularly Twin Peaks. The game's setting and main character were also solidified in their minds. However, the team initially aimed to avoid a linear experience like its predecessor, Max Payne.
From my perspective, storytelling-wise, I wanted to create something deeper as a story than what Max Payne had been. More layers to the main character, more layers to the story. And there was a strong idea also that this story would be structured like a TV show in episodic format.
Previously on Alan Wake, Alice has been kidnapped.
Alan, please help me.
Alice?
You'll do exactly what I say if you ever want to see a white.
This leads to the concept of an open-world survival game, where players must gather resources and prepare themselves during the day and confront enemies known as the Taken at the night. Of course, working on many ideas and exploring concepts without a clear direction for so long led to some frustration for the team. Trying different things and having a foundation but not realizing what they really want to do was really rough for the team at the time. It became even more challenging when they presented the first demo to their publisher. They had established the idea of light and darkness, the concept of an open world for free roaming, and the character of Alan Wake. Fortunately, the demo caught the attention of Xbox, and they wanted to assist in bringing life and direction to the project. However, the additional help ultimately became a hindrance, and it led to further deviation from the central idea, leading to frustration as they were missing milestones, just putting more and more pressure on Remedy's team, as they were also not happy with the results and how the game was shaping to be. The team, however, was determined to make this project work. They were passionate about it, and with that in mind, they found a solution, creating a team solely dedicated to piecing together the elements of this gigantic puzzle that was Alan Wake. This approach aimed to minimize unnecessary development time and prevent the team from deviating from the central idea once again. With the team now focused on making the right decisions and following a determined path, Alan Wake went to a free-roaming open-world game with a day and night cycle to the linear, story-driven action-adventure game that we all know and love.
Nobody move! Get your hands off of my client!
Who are you?
I'm Barry Wheeler, his agent. If you have business with Mr. Wake, you talk to me. You yokels won't know what hit you once I sick my lawyers on your asses.
Given the brief summary of the development history, I believe we now have a better structure to understand Alan Wake from a different scope. We can analyze both the good and bad that this game has and delve into the mysteries that lurk around Bright Falls. As this video is being written, the first Alan Wake game has two versions, the original and the remastered version. Upon some research, I found out the PC port for the remaster is quite chaotic.
I instead played the remake, and this is about how well it went? Alright. What is up with this? You have that much... Alright. God damn it! It's Mr. Main! It's Pat Main. Oh, never mind. I guess they don't want me to look at Mr. Pat Main. Oh, the biggest boss ever! Artifacting!
So, the original version it is. Maybe I will give the remaster a try someday, but for now, let's just stick with the classics. Alan Wake starts with his first mention of Stephen King, where he says nightmares exist outside the logic, and there's little fun to be had in explanations. I do enjoy this idea a lot, because it ties perfectly with what I said back in my first video of the Retrospective, that, by the way, if you didn't watch, go ahead and help me making YouTube my full-time job. The concept of building up mystery and creating fear from the unknown is the right recipe from a great horror story. For example, in the movie Hush, an author who is hard of hearing lives alone in the woods. At some point, she is haunted by a masked serial killer. It's a really interesting plot, but it quickly loses its impact when, within the first few minutes, the killer reveals his face, breaking the entire mystery of who he is. Is he human? Is he the monster? Is he even real? Like Michael Myers, for example, where there's the concept that he's a man behind the mask. But as the series progresses, people start to think of him as the embodiment of evil. As long as the mystery stays with the audience, the thrill and the bone-chilling feeling of not knowing what is around the corner keep the horror experience at its peak. After Alan's monologue and his brief introduction, we are now introduced to the very first section of the game, Alan's Nightmare. This first level serves as a tutorial level where the game shows its mechanics as you progress, going through some bits of the story. Right away, I noticed something really interesting as I'm going towards this bridge, which was the supposedly wrong way to go. Look at what happened.
The bridge had collapsed. I'd have to find another way to the lighthouse.
Narration. Alan Wake is a writer, and as the events of the game are unfolding, he narrates sections of things that you find as you explore the map. It serves as guidance to show the player where to go, and at the same time, it doesn't overstay its welcome. It's a brilliant design idea that fits the plot, making sense for the story, and not being just signs that were thrown there just because it's a video game. Now onto the right path. We descend the stairs and we are attacked by the first enemy of the game, the hitchhiker. In this section, we begin to get a glimpse of the combat mechanics and how the light and dark mechanics also function. However, the more I played Alan Wake, the more my feelings about its combat kept changing. So here's my personal opinion on this topic after spending some time experiencing the whole thing. Alan Wake's combat is pretty satisfying but also quite clunky at times. For example, as the hitchhiker is chasing you in the first sequence, right after that, we learn how to dodge, and the time frame for the dodge is very precise. However, for some reason, Alan's movements and animations feel stiff at times, giving a sense of clunkiness to the dodge mechanic. Every time you successfully dodge, the game goes into slow motion for a bit, indicating that you successfully dodged the attack. But as I progressed through the story, it became increasingly difficult to nail those dodges because Alan's movements and animations can feel a bit awkward. After completing the dodge tutorial, a bright ray of light starts talking to us as if it were God or something. This light begins to provide some explanation of what's happening, but because we've just started the game, some things don't make sense yet. Moving forward, the same light gives us a flashlight, thus initiating the combat tutorial. Here, you have to use your flashlight to cleanse the darkness away from the enemy, make them vulnerable to damage. Every enemy has a dark aura that functions as a shield, so essentially you point your flashlight until the shield is drained and then you finish them off by shooting. The concept is simple yet unique and creative. There is no crosshair, the flashlight is your aim. Shooting feels satisfying with weapons providing impactful visual feedback. You really feel that you are hurting them with each shot you take. Additionally, every time you point your flashlight at an enemy, it starts to drain their shield, but if you press an aim button to power up Alan's flashlight, causing it to burn through the dark aura faster and stagger enemies each time you do so. The flashlight has great stopping power. I found myself using it a lot to control the environment first before starting to blast away the enemies. So, tutorial is done, and now we have to reach the lighthouse. We need to be quick because the darkness is trying to reach us at any cost. Desperately, we run towards the lighthouse that we spot, seeking shelter inside. However, as we went inside trying to find shelter, we are attacked.
Baby, just another nightmare. Everything's fine.
As I mentioned before, it was just a nightmare, and now we are back to reality. Alan wakes up inside his car as they are arriving at Bright Falls alongside his wife, Alice, and not long after his new friend that he just met, Pat Main, the radio station guy that we'll be talking about later. Upon arriving, Alice drives Alan to the diner where he needs to meet Mr. Stuckey, the owner of the place that Alan and Alice plan to stay at during their vacation and also have the keys to the place. As Alan enters the diner, he's greeted by Rose, clearly one of Alan's biggest fans as she is all excited and gushing about how she loves Alan's work. But Alan is a dick. He despises the attention, and this is one of the first glimpses of the story that shows how short-tempered, rude, and sometimes just an asshole Alan can be. Rose tells us that Mr. Stuckey went to the restroom, and as we move towards it, we found this lady holding a lantern as she seemed really worried about Alan going to the dark. Alan doesn't seem to care as we go further into the dark corridor. We knock at the restroom's door calling for Mr. Stuckey, but an old lady appeared out of nowhere. Her face is covered by a dark veil, mysterious and eerie. She hands us the keys that we are looking for. And Alan didn't even hesitate. He just grabbed the keys and that's it. Great job, Alan. Imagine if you refused the keys. The story would go like this.
Carl couldn't make it. Unfortunately, he was taken ill. But I have the key for you and instructions on how to get to the lake.
No.
We grab the keys and Alice is waiting for us outside. As she drives us away, Mr. Stucky appears. He's holding the keys, and thus the player realizes that something really creepy is about to happen.
Mrs. Wake! Your keys!
Here it is. Cauldron Lake, a cabin that would be super important for the story. Basically, Alan is a writer, a famous one, as we learn from talking to Padme and Rose. However, Alan has been 2 years without writing anything, not a single word. He's suffering from writer's block. To help him with that, Alice, his wife, takes him on a vacation to a different and distant place. From the polluted and noisy streets of New York to the calm and beautiful nature of Bright Falls. The idea was for Alan to breathe some fresh air and be inspired to write again. However, Alan didn't know about this plan until Alice shows him that she brought him a typewriter so he can maybe write if he feels like it. However, this drives Alan mad, and he and Alice start to argue. Alan storms out of the cabin, going outside to take some air, but as this happens, the power goes off, and the cabin goes completely dark. Alice screams for the distance. She has scotophobia, an irrational or disproportionate fear of the dark. Alan rushes inside as he hears a loud noise coming from outside. He goes all the way to the cabin's balcony to find that his wife has fallen into the lake. Without hesitating for a second, Alan dives into the lake's dark water, desperate to find his wife. But the game cuts to black, and then Alan wakes up from a car crash at night, all by himself. And here's where the game finally starts.
Waking up in the crashed car felt like I had woken from one nightmare and entered another. I couldn't remember how I got there. All I knew was that something terrible had happened to Alice. The phone was dead. I'd have to find help on foot.
Alan Wake introduction is really well designed. By this point of the game, I know about the combat, score mechanics, who Alan is, and its personality, backstory, how he reacts to the world around him, his wife, and how despite being a dick, he loves her deeply to the point of putting himself in danger without thinking. The game sets up the world perfectly, and by this point of the game, I was intrigued by this amazing setup that was long enough to introduce the game world and aesthetic. Alan seems to not have a clue about what happened, what events lead him to be here now in this car crash. It's up to the player to find out. Exploring a bit further, we can see a gas station by the distance, and now we have an objective. Cool. Let's keep exploring. Not long after, we stumble upon that light again, the one we saw back at Alan's nightmare. This suggests that we are having another dream, or perhaps that previous one was real. We don't know for certain. From this light, pages of a manuscript fly into Alan's direction. Among those pages, there's one with a title, Departure.
The loose sheets of paper were pages from a manuscript entitled Departure. That was the name I planned to use for the next novel I had never gotten started. I was named the author. I hadn't written it. I couldn't remember writing it. In the scene on the page, the hero was attacked by an axe murderer in the woods at night.
Here's where the game introduces another feature, the manuscript pages. These pages essentially serve as files scattered through the game, offering insight into the world building and lore. However, the game presents them in a particularly interesting and creative manner. As you progress, you come across pages of the manuscript that you can collect and read. Each time you open a page to read, Alan will narrate it, which makes sense since he's the author. These pages contain information about future encounters, providing minor spoilers for what's about to come, as well as additional information about side characters and past events, adding more layers to the story and its characters. Some pages are easy to find, while others require thorough exploration of the map. Typically, those containing crucial and revealing information are found in hidden locations. Additionally, these are pages that can only be found when playing the games on the hardest difficulty. Now we need to proceed through this section, but we encounter Mr. Stucky, who is now consumed by the dark presence. These enemies are called the Taken. the shadowy adversary throughout the game. We encounter other characters possessed by the dark presence as we progress, but for now it's time to confront Mr. Stucky, or better said, run from him. And look, another Stephen King reference.
I had to figure a way out of this. Any second now and Stucky would be knocking on the door with his axe like Nicholson in The Shining.
Exploring Alan Wake, it's quite rewarding. Venturing off the beaten path to explore every nook and cranny of each section will reward you with collectibles like cough thermos and manuscript pages. Additionally, you will come across yellow paint that is only visible when you point a flashlight towards it. Following this yellow paint will lead you to the hidden supply caches and painted messages. These messages warn you to not trust anyone in the dark and hint that the person who left them knew about the dark presence long before we did. Oh no, is it taken? Just be careful not to fall into the water. I love those videos where people compare how good is the game by showing some graphical aspects like NPC interactions, animations and such. And each and every single video has the water physics test to see how good the game is. Please don't do that in this game. Now here's something that many games used to do back then. There's a few that do that right now, which is showing where to go after pulling a lever or pushing a button. It feels a bit unnecessary, but let me explain my point. We arrived at the login site, where we found this button. Upon examining it, Alan's narration kicks in, saying that we need to find a generator or something. This is nice because it guides the player towards the next objective, using narration which doesn't reveal the path or the solution, just providing a hint of what or where to look for. But upon exploring and finding the generator, after turning it on, the camera pans to where you need to go, essentially showing the way. So the game has these moments where it has faith in the design and uses narration brilliantly to provide guidance, giving enough hints for the player to understand the objective. However, right at the next section, it gives up and pans the camera towards the right path. It's not something that makes the game bad, it's just something that caught my attention. Oh, the first puzzle of the game, using the slug lift to align the logs so you can make a bridge. Right, that's a new mechanic right after a few combat sections, changing the pace a bit, and I appreciate those moments. Alan Wake always likes to introduce one-time mechanics here and there between the combat encounters so the game doesn't feel too repetitive. I will talk more about those mechanics as we go, but keep them in mind. As we venture through the dark woods, we stumbled upon our trusty shotgun and a radio. Upon interacting with the radio, we hear a familiar voice coming from it. Oh, it's Pat Main, the guy we met back at the car ship. The game also has radios scattered all around the map. By listening to Pat's transmissions, we can hear him talking with other Bright Falls citizens about trivial stuff that provides more context about the world and Bright Falls. For example, we learn about the Deer Fest, an upcoming event, and how some people are starting to notice strange occurrences in the town. This is a great storytelling feature that shows the player how the town is reacting to all of this, giving a better sense of scale. Throughout the game, we will come across generators and lampposts that are illuminated. These serve as small beacons of light among the dark ambience of the game. Standing beneath a lit lamppost has its benefits. It refills your entire health, and any pursuing enemies instantly disappear. What I found fascinating is the significance of the light in the game. Much of our exploration takes place in dark environments, relying solely on our flashlight for guidance. This constant darkness creates a pervasive sense of being lost and on edge, especially when you are engaged in battles with enemies lurking in the shadows. However, discovering a light source, even if only for a moment, provides a welcome respite. It offers a brief moment of calm, interrupting the intense space and atmosphere and granting us a sense of safety before plunging back into the darkness. Here's one of my favorite aspects of the game, the Night Springs television show. Inspired by Twilight Zone, Night Springs comprises short episodes that play each time you find a TV. There are a few episodes, each focusing on a different theme. For example, one episode discusses quantum suicide, where a scientist creates a machine that prevents him from dying. The theory behind this concept is that every time you encounter a near-death experience, despite remaining alive, you are actually dead. but the version of you that died existed in another dimension. So every time you die in an accident, for instance, you shift to a dimension where you survived the accident, but you were unaware of it. It's a really complex concept, but you need to watch this Night Spring episodes. They have this Black Mirror vibe that I really enjoy. For the first time in many years, I heard a voice. It was trying to say something, but I couldn't hear the whole message. Just glimpses of it. The phone, an object of power, a threshold, an overlap. It told me things. Cauldron Lake, the clicker, Night Springs, Alan Wake. I need to make sense of all of it so I can write the script. To finish this retrospective, it needs to be perfect. The voice coming from the phone is guiding me as I write, shaping the script at his will. The video is changing. I think I made a mistake. Oh look, that's Mr. Stucky boss fight, and I really didn't like it. Here we are introduced to a new enemy type. They have insane speed and they keep dashing around as you try to point your flashlight at them. The problem is they don't stop moving and you keep losing them from your sight. They are not hard, they are just annoying. Mr. Stucky is dead and now it's finally time to get to the gas station. Upon arriving, I find another television, but this time it was not a Night Springs episode.
All right. I'll keep writing. Outside there's only darkness. Outside the cabin, outside the story, there's only darkness. I can feel her presence in the dark. Just now I could smell her perfume in the room. I'll reach her, I'll fix it up. I'll bring her back. The story will come true. If I stop, she's lost.
I don't believe this. It'd been me on the TV, talking crazy. Was I losing my mind?
Here we get some glimpses of major story points that we'll be exploring in a later section of the video. But for now, we use the gas station telephone to call the police, asking for help in finding Alan's wife back at Cauldron Lake. However, the officer delivers the shocking proof that Cauldron Lake has been gone since a major eruption that occurred back in the 70s. Alan fell to the ground, realizing what he just heard as Sarah, the police officer, asked if he knew about Mr. Stucky, but Alan realized that it would be better not to tell the whole truth just yet, otherwise Sarah will not help him to find Alice.
I realized I couldn't tell her what had happened in the forest. She wouldn't have believed me, and then she wouldn't have helped me with Alice.
That concludes chapter 1. Cue the credits. As I mentioned earlier, Alan Wake is structured like a TV show, so after the end of each episode, we got this outro with a full song playing. It's really cool and adds to an immersion of watching a TV show, making you eager to watch the next episode, despite having a recap right after, which doesn't make sense because we just played the last chapter, but who cares, it is fun and I love it. Chapter 2 starts with a playable flashback where we can learn more about Alan and also Alice. It's a short section where we explore Alan's apartment, discovering some of his books, especially the last one that he wrote called The Sudden Stop, along with the manuscript pages from the book. This time, the pages are narrated by Alex Casey, the main character from the book. Additionally, if you pay really close attention, you will find a QR code. And this is not the only one. There are 3 in total. The first one is in the Nightmares section. If you scan it, you will be led to the Alan Wake's Facebook page. The second one will lead you to a text that quotes, turns out that isn't so bad even if you are not sitting on a couch when you play it. Who knew? And the third and final one is really painful. But in the remastered version, they actually changed that. So the QR codes now lead to unlisted videos on Remedy's YouTube channel about Alan talking about his time in the dark place. I will leave the links of all those videos in the description. After exploring a bit, you will notice a strong blizzard outside causing the power to go out, plunging the apartment into darkness and immediately frightening Alice. Alan this time grabs a flashlight and lights up some candles. As they sit down on the couch, Alan tries to comfort Alice. He talks about an object he has called the clicker, a light switch that his mom gave him when he was afraid of the dark after having nightmares. She said that if he used the clicker, it would scare the monsters away. After sharing the story with Alice, Alan gives her the clicker as a gesture so she can use it if she finds herself into the darkness again. Now, here's something in this game that bothers me a bit. Some cutscenes and dialogue sounds a bit odd, as if recorded the lines in different sections and just added them together. Sometimes it doesn't feel natural when one person is talking and then the other person starts talking right after. It feels weird and sometimes out of sync, but not all dialogue is like this, just some specific sections, including this one. I will talk a bit more about dialogue when we get to the better parts, where it really works, but for now, let's continue. Back to the present day. We are being examined by a doctor who advised us to take a break after the shock Alan has been through. But of course, we ignore that. Otherwise, there would be no story. The game is called Alan Wake, not Alan Resting. Ah, come on guys, that was a good one. Here, we talk to Sarah once again to retrieve our phone, and just a few seconds later, it starts to ring. It's Alice asking for help. She's being kidnapped by someone. The kidnapper is on the phone. He tells us the location, and now we need to find Alice. While exploring the police station, we encounter Dr. Hartman, which infuriates Alan because he knew that Dr. Hartman was talking to Alan on the phone before coming to Bright Falls. Hartman offers a place for Alan to stay, but he's not buying it. Alan demands to know about his wife, and as Hartman avoids giving a straight answer, Alan hits him with a beautiful right hook. Moments later, Barry arrives, and I freaking love Barry.
Hey, nobody move! Get your hands off of my client!
Who are you?
I'm Barry Wheeler, his agent.
Barry is a fantastic character who has great chemistry with Alan. He's refreshingly honest and often feels like the voice of reason. He's not afraid to call out Alan's sometimes questionable decisions, where he always not agreeing to get into stupid plans like, oh, here's the perfect moment to leave Bright Falls, but Alan doesn't want to, and Barry is always really like, really? Are you stupid? He always has these funny reactions, and it's just always funny to hear what Barry has to say. By the way, all the interactions that Barry has with the cast are great examples for when the dialogue actually works. Now we need to go and meet the kidnapper at Lover's Peak. And of course, you tell everything to Barry before going to meet this kidnapper. And of course, Barry has something to say.
I don't like it, Al. I don't like any of it. It's not good. In fact, it's the absolute opposite of good.
So we grab our keys, pet the dog. Wait, you can pet the dog? 0 out of 10. IGN. We head out to our new lodge near Lover's Peak so we can rescue Alice. Alan asks Barry to stay at the lodge and call the police if Alan doesn't come back until morning, but before that, look at how soft this lamp is.
Call the FBI.
Damn it, Barry, they'll kill her. This is not a goddamn debate.
Of course, Barry still doesn't know and doesn't believe everything that Alan told him. The take-in, the eerie events, those things are bullshit for him. But Alan knew it, and that's why he wants to go alone. So in chapter 2, there's nothing much going on. There's a lot of combat sections and manuscript pages to find, even some backstory, but the game slows down quite a bit. And this will happen a lot. Between major plot points, there will be a lot of repetitive combat moments where you fight the same enemies and gather resources for the next encounter. So if you don't like the combat, the game can feel a bit tedious for a good portion. Now we need to use this questionable trolley to reach the next section, and of course, something happens. Despite that, we cross successfully, but we are ambushed by the Taken. But we realize that we lost our entire gear. However, we can see our flashlight right next to us. As we try to reach it, a Taken steps on it, but it doesn't take long for someone to help us by using a flare that vanishes all the enemies away.
Come on, we gotta get moving. More of them coming. That flashlight's kid stuff. The flares will keep the bastards away.
It didn't take long for Wake to recognize that this guy was the kidnapper, but we have no gun and we don't have much choice to follow him for now. This section was really annoying at the first playthrough. The second time it was a bit better, but still really frustrating at some point. Here the game introduces us to the flares, a really powerful tool to use in desperate moments, serving as a panic button and also a really good crowd control tool. You can use the flare and immediately drop to the ground, or holding it in your hands as you slowly walk. Also doing that, you are not allowed to shoot. It's just a safety button when you get surrounded by enemies, something that will happen constantly. This section is a nightmare. You have to use your flashlight and the flares to get rid of the enemy's dark aura so the kidnapper can finish them off. But the problem here is that the AI is purposely bad at shooting, leading to some frustrating moments as you're trying to dodge enemy attacks and the guy is missing all the shots. Also here, you start to realize how you can easily die for cheap attacks. The Taken will spawn out of your line of sight constantly, so they can attack you easily. Even in stun locking you into 2 or even 3 hits, there's no iframes, so sometimes you will just die if you are ambushed by one of the Taken. And this is not even the hardest difficult in the game, and when you add the clunky movement and dodge mechanics paired with Alan having no gun, this section becomes a frustrating one sadly. After we finally neutralize all the hordes of Taken, Alan demands to know about Alice's whereabouts, but the kidnapper insists on getting the manuscript in return. Alan, with his short fuse, refuses to entertain this and delivers his signature right hook. Now we need to find the kidnapper, but at least we have our revolver back. As I arrive here, I notice a really nice design detail. A tree with bear traps and blood all over it. This is a great way for the game to warn the player about the bear traps in the area without using expository dialogue or camera showing the bear traps. This is a really good level design moment. Where the kidnapper might be? Maybe here up in the trees. Oh, I think he's not here. Neither should I. Another nice detail, every time you point your flashlight towards a bear trap, it has this shiny glow indicating their locations. They might be easy to spot, but if you are careless, you can easily get caught. Okay, can the enemy get stuck into the bear trap so I can kill them? And no, of course. 0 out of 10. Metacritic. As I traverse through the woods once again, I start to realize how much I despise the hatch throwers. Those guys have pinpoint accuracy, throwing hatches from the most astonishing distances. So, if you take spacing to fight melee enemies, the ones further away will always start throwing hatches at you. There is a sound cue, but you still end up getting hit a lot, trust me. Those guys have some seriously crazy aim. Here we found another TV that tells a bit more on Alan writing and the manuscript and how we should go. There's rules to follow, and not long after, the classic enemy coming out of a restroom cabin. You can learn about nature and yourself. And here's something that I totally wasn't expecting to have in this game. Driving sections? Yes. That's what you heard. Remember at the start of the video when I mentioned that this game's initial concept was supposed to be open world? Well, they kept some mechanics from those early ideas, and one of them was the driving mechanic. Driving a car feels really out of place here. It doesn't handle well. The handling is very clunky, and the idea of using the headlights of the car to burn the enemies before ramming into them is not well executed. Most of the time, you need to stop your car, aim the headlight, wait for them to lose their aura, and then you can ram into them. Sometimes they lose their shield instantly, but the best way to deal with them is just to ignore them. There will be more driving sections throughout the campaign, but this mechanic really doesn't belong here. One of the most criticized aspects of Alan Wake is that sometimes the game doesn't know what it wants to be. This is likely a reason why the development was so hard and convoluted. It really shows how they were struggling to envision what Alan Wake needed to be. Okay, let's burn his aura and kill him. Yes, nice. Okay, let's kill those other ones. The game crashed. Before I continue to find the kidnapper, we encounter an unforeseen event. Barry calls us, informing us that the birds are attacking the lodge. So we drive back to him, and now we have to fend off these birds and make some chicken nuggets. I really like this section because it feels satisfying to take down those birds. The visual and the sound feedback is really well done. It's refreshing change from the enemies we faced back in the woods. The Taken don't have too much variation. We have the normal and the most common ones that run towards you and throw hatches if they're distant. We have the brutes that use the hammer to do more damage but are slow moving. We have the fast enemies we encountered already, and the chainsaw one, which is a faster brute but not excessively so, and it doesn't insta-kill you. Now that Barry is saved, we need to write the rest of the manuscript that the kidnapper asked for. However, the problem is we don't have the entire thing with us, just a couple pages that we've been collecting throughout the game. Alan tries to write the continuation, but he fails as the right block still grips in his mind. Meanwhile, Barry goes to the town to see if he can gather some information about the kidnapper, but ends up receiving a phone call from Rose, Alan's biggest fan, who he met back at the diner. She tells Barry that she has the manuscript at her home. She sounds really strange on the phone, but Barry doesn't seem to care, thus ending chapter 2.
Day. Hope you come back soon. Welcome to the Oh Dear
Diner.
Good girl.
Has shown me things. It's all so beautiful, so sublime. I need the script to thrive, to extend its power beyond what is already capable. Shows the way. I must change the script. I will not allow this retrospective to end it now. It is not the time. I need to be free. I'm Dr. Sam, from the Federal Bureau of Control. Barry and Alan arrive at the trailer park where Rose lives, and for some reason people keep talking about how nice Rose is. I don't know, it just feels forced and kinda awkward sometimes.
We're looking for Rose. Works as a waitress down at the diner.
Rose, sure. Nice girl. That Rose, she's a nice girl.
So here we receive some important expository dialogue, and I have to give props to the writing team for making it fit so well. It's not just Barry talking nonsense out of nowhere, it has context and blends perfectly with the plot. Barry tells Alan how weird things always happen in Bright Falls, and everything is always related to the Cauldron Lake, where back then people used to believe that Cauldron Lake was a gateway to another dimension. He also found reports about Thomas Zane owning Cauldron Lake, and that he was also a famous writer, but Barry didn't find anything that Thomas wrote. Zane was also known for his passion for diving, so much so that the place was nicknamed Diver's Isle. However, in 1970, a volcano under the island erupted and destroyed the entire place along with Zane. However, a week earlier, a girl named Barbara Jagger drowned in Cauldron Lake. She and Zane were lovers. The other big review is that all those articles that Barry found with this information were written by Cynthia Weaver, the lady holding the lantern back at the diner, the one who warned Alan about the darkness. After Barbara and Zane's death, she seemed to be deeply shocked about it. We arrived at Rose's place, but of course she didn't have the manuscript. Alan realized that a little too late because he and Barry had already drunk some coffee that she seemed to be mixed with some sort of sleeping pills, causing Alan and Barry to faint right on the spot. Now the game gives us more layers about the plot. This old lady that we've been seeing throughout the game is the Dark Presence, but is using Barbara's Jagger body as a vessel. We also learn that the light that was guiding us is actually Thomas Zane, and he's trying to help us figure out a way to stop the Dark Presence. After waking up, we found another TV that explains more about why the manuscript has been written the way it is. Alan has an editor, and this editor is none other than Barbara Jagger, or better said, the Dark Presence. So the Dark Presence is revising the script and shifting the story genre to horror. This way she tells Alan that writing the story this way will bring Alice back. Now with this information, the story might get a bit confusing and you might have a lot of questions, but trust me, just take everything that I said from the start of chapter 3 until now and I will make sense of it later. But for now, let's continue. Exploring Rose's trailer, we found some pictures of Alan plastered all over her walls. Heading to the living room, we see that Barry is still fast asleep. Alan decides to go out and brings the car closer to the trailer so he doesn't have to carry Barry all the way. But as he steps outside, he encounters our nemesis, Agent Nightingale. From this point on, he will be chasing Alan throughout the game. Not like an actual nemesis from Resident Evil, but we will encounter him a couple more times. What I love the most about him is that every time he finds Alan, he uses a different author name each time he addresses him.
I'll get you yet, even if it kills me, you hear me? You hear me, H.P. Lovecraft?
If you ever had to explain someone about what plot armor means, just show them this cutscene. As we escape from the Nightingale and his agents, we stumble upon some cop cars where you can listen to radio frequencies. From these, we learn that Nightingale is chasing Alan against Sarah's will, the police sheriff. He really wants Alan and doesn't even care if what he's doing is wrong. Now, Alan needs to meet the kidnapper. He received a call early instructing him to bring the manuscript to the coal mine. Additionally, we can see the Dark Presence attacking some of the police officers who are chasing Alan. Here, for the first time, we can see the Dark Presence is growing stronger as the story progresses, just as Alan said. Another really amazing detail in Alan Wake that I noticed in this section after we see the helicopter going down, attacked by a swarm, I could see the gas station from chapter 1 far away in the distance. This is really nice because it gives the player a sense of progression. This aspect is really well done in Alan Wake because, again, the game was supposed to be open world and they had the entire map built. However, after they changed it to a linear game, they still used the same map. They took the entire map they built for the open world game and started to create a path. So point A to point B would be chapter 1, from point B to point C would be chapter 2, and so on. Chapter 3 is really straightforward. After escaping Nightingale, now we need to get to the coal mine. However, Alan has a change of plans when he sees the radio station from afar. He remembers that Padman was the host and he might help Alan by giving directions to the coal mine. There are a few highlights in this chapter, like the simple puzzle for example, where you have to turn on a generator to use the searchlight, cleanse the gate from darkness, because you have no gear. Moments later, you find yourself using the searchlights to kill enemies. This is a great way to introduce a simpler mechanic first and then reuse those same mechanics in a more complex encounters. Stacking them to create more gameplay sections, they are intuitive to the player because they already learned the basics in a previous section. Another highlight in chapter 3 is that we found a flashbang, the most powerful weapon in the entire game. The flash is so bright, it kills enemies instantly without the need of a weapon. The flashbangs are really powerful against enemies with high health and also mini-bosses that you fight throughout the game, like a bulldozer. Yes, this game has some of the most unexpected bosses ever. Also here, I started to get a little lost in some sections where the level design can be quite misleading. Of course, whatever you get lost, just look at the compass in the top left corner, but in some sections, if you try to deviate the main path to look for some extra loot or pages, you might get a bit lost due to the lack of guidance and the confusing dark environment. We arrived at the radio station where before talking to Pat, he made the mistake to announce at the radio that I was there. Not his fault, he didn't know about Alan and Nightingale, which it didn't took long for him to find us.
Find the time to do this, Mr. Wake.
Nowhere to run now, Dan Brown. You back away from me. Don't hurt.
Whoa. Everyone calm down. Put the gun down. We're all friends here, right?
Cool your jets, Nightingale. We got him. What the hell's the matter with you? There's a civilian in there.
So back to our main objective. We need to find a coal mine by ourselves. But it's fine, because I just need to go all the way here, so... the game crashed again. This section here is perfect to demonstrate how clunky the movement and the physics of this game can be. We have a few sections of this game where you have to do some platforming, but usually end up a bit like this.
The darkness that was pursuing me was growing stronger, and it was taking over every...
We fought the bulldozer boss fight. And now, more driving. At least this time the game shifts to the dark night to the bright, serene sunlight. I really like those daylight sections. They give you a sense of safety and accomplishment as you survive the horrible night. However, it doesn't last for too long because as we arrive at the spot where the kidnapper was supposed to meet us, he doesn't appear. Instead, we receive a phone call telling us to meet him in another location. This game has its moments of the princess is in another castle quite a lot, which it drags the game on a bit. I understand that part of might be because they wanted to use the entire map they built, so that's the solution they found, which is totally fine. However, at this point, chapters 2 and 3 uncover crucial plot points for a few minutes, and then the next 4 to 5 hours I just spend trying to find a kidnapper. It drags the game's pace down for sure. There's this cool moment where the lights went off for 3 seconds and we could see the flashlight lighting up just a bit of the room until the power came back up again. This made me realize the wasted potential of the flashlight. Putting Alan into really dark sections where you can only see where the flashlight is pointing would be a great to enhance the horror aspect of the game and also break up the heavily action-focused sections. It would have been so nice. I hope they explore that in Alan Wake 2. We'll see. I was exploring this cabin and I discovered that oil cans can also be affected by the dark presence.
Ah!
Oh, I see. This is another game design thing where the game is telling me to do it without telling me to do it. Let's dive into the... God damn it, game. Do you remember the log puzzle where we connected the logs to form a bridge right at the beginning of the game? Here's another version, but a little bit more complex, stacking mechanics once again to create a good puzzle. Great job. So we finally find the kidnapper, but not for long. The dark presence formed a tornado that sucked the kidnapper into its core, killing him. Alan was also grabbed by the tornado, but he quickly used the flare to escape his grasp, leading him to fall off a huge cliff and land on his back in the lake. But god damn it, I don't know how he didn't even break his back falling from that height. After the big fall, we are rescued by someone who, upon waking up, we found out to be Dr. Hartman. At his clinic, he tried to persuade Alan to believe that Alan was actually dead, and that the encounters we are having against the dark presence were just delusions from Alan's mind. I thought they were trying to make some sort of plot twist here, but Alan himself talks about knowing that Hartman was just lying. The reason? Well, we learned from manuscript pages that Hartman was actually interested in using Alan's powers so he could make him write for him. He kept in touch with Alice while they were in New York, convincing her to take Alan to Bright Falls so Hartman could treat him. That's why we see Hartman at a police station at the beginning of the game, offering Alan to stay in his clinic. Another thing is that the kidnapper was sent by Hartman to capture him. That's why he knew about the script all along. It was Hartman who told him everything. Now that we know Hartman's intentions, we just play along as he takes us for a tour at his clinic. While I was following him, I started to realize how beautiful the game can be, once again enhancing the contrast between the night and day cycle. I think Alan Wake perfectly encapsulates how dangerous the dark can be and how safe and relaxing the daylight is after being hunted by the Taken for so long. Those moments of calmness are a great highlight of the game, and it is something that should be praised. As Dr. Hartman wrapped our little tour, we found once again the Anderson brothers, Odin and Thor. The first time we found them was back at the diner at chapter 1.
I could really use a tune right now. Coconut, number 6 in the jukebox.
Both are members from the band Old Gods of Asgard that, if you watch the first part of the retrospective, you will be familiar with. By the way, I just love that Thor has a squeaky hammer that made me laugh so hard.
Zane!
A storm is forming in the horizon, and Hartman says to Alan that he needs to check some stuff. As he leaves, the Anderson brothers start talking to Alan, telling him to go to their farm, so he could hear the message that will tell Wake what to do. Interestingly, they didn't call us Alan, but Zane. Assuming they had a band in the 70s, maybe this could mean that Alan and Zane might look a bit too similar, not only in the backstories with Cauldron Lake, but also in their appearance. But this might be a topic for a future video. For now, let's go back to our room. As we went back to our room to try to write something like Hartman wants us to do, Alan again can't because writer's block. But it didn't take long for us to hear something break in the background. The clinic guard went to check what's going on, asked Alan to stay in his room. Of course, we followed him seconds after he went to check. And surprisingly, we found the Andersons were causing a riot. Thor even used a true hammer to knock out one of the gods. Alan took the opportunity to grab the keys and leave. But before that, we found Barry locked in a tiny room that Hartman had locked him up.
About time! Barry, man, am I glad to see you.
As we used the keys to grab our gear, Hartman appeared, and Alan didn't want to hear any more of it, pointing his gun at him asking for Barry to get out and get a car. But as Hartman started to spill the beans, the dark presence didn't want to hear all this chit-chat.
Wake, listen to me. This is a mistake. Don't you see? Together we can create something absolutely wonderful, with your ability and mine.
Now this entire section become a chasing sequence where the dark presence is taking over the entire clinic and we need to escape. But before that, there's a really interesting sequence where we need to run from this massive metal sphere, but then we need to dodge in a specific position so the sphere can hit the main door, allowing us to leave. It was a really intuitive and cool mechanic, but really risky considering the clunkiness of the controls. Now we meet Barry, and there are only a couple more combat sections before we escape. The last one is a holdout, where you need to wait until Barry opens up the metal gate. This section can be quite hard. There are tons of enemies coming at you, while the ones in the further back are throwing perfect hatches at you. My first playthrough of this part was quite a nightmare, and even the second playthrough I struggled a bit. It is a really confined space where one mistake can cost you dearly. Now we start to see the dark presence growing even stronger after watching the whole clinic being taken over by it. So Alan decided to trust the Andersons and go to the farm, finding this message they were talking about. But as they were driving to Valhalla, they crashed, resulting in Alan and Barry separating once again. This section is just amazing. It is my favorite from the entire game. This is the type of section that you play an entire game for, farm. Here we met with Barry after running a bit from the darkness and gearing up ourselves once again before finding Barry. One of the things that I forgot to mention is that most of the times we will be losing our gear, so if you're carrying a strong arsenal, don't be afraid to use it. Otherwise you lost everything the next chapter or even section. Making our way to the farm, we found Zane delivering more pages to us.
I'm trying to deliver each page to the right time and place.
I'm trying to show you how the story goes.
I had seen glimpses of the light before. I had seen it in my dream. It was a strange spaceman or a diver in a bulky suit. He was the one who'd been placing the pages on my path.
Another TV telling a bit how Alan wrote himself into the story, basically stating that we are playing Alan and his decisions were or are being written as the story goes, and also that the story needs to follow a certain structure, which explains why he doesn't simply write like, and I saved Alice. It doesn't work like that. Oh, there's a small cliff here. I think I can take a shortcut here. Oh, god damn it, game. So we arrive at Anderson's farm for the greatest highlight of this game, the best combat encounter of the first Alan Wake.
Ow! Run! Incoming! There's too many of them! God damn!
This section is simply amazing. You have basically unlimited ammunition, so you just use everything you can as the Taken rush to attack you. Utilize the environment, as Barry is using the lights for the stage. It can also heal you if you stay a little bit in the light spot. This section is just brilliant and super enjoyable. You are just killing the Taken, feeling super powerful as you listen to some old Gods of Asgard bangers jamming in the background. It's a truly memorable moment and something that makes Alan Wake shine and feels really unique. I love that they have the story they wanted to follow, but at the same time, you get those moments where you can see the devs just wanted to make something for the sake of making it. Alan Wake works when it embraces those moments, and you can see how they shy away here in the game, but not in the future titles. After killing some Taken with style, we arrived at Anderson's house. Upon exploring a bit, we found a record with lyrics that were the message that Odin and Thor were talking about. Find the Lady of the Light, referring to none other than Cynthia Weaver, the lantern lady from the diner. But before we go to find her, Barry and Alan decide to drink moonshine and to get drunk. I confess, I found this moment a bit out of the character, especially for Alan. It feels a bit out of the blue, especially after discovering that the moonshine was really important to the plot, revealing how Alan got captured by the Dark Presence. As Alan faded, he had a flashback showing that after going after Alice, he actually got captured by Jagger, who told him to write so he could save Alice. Since then, that's why he woke up in the car crash, because at this point, we were into the story that Alan is writing about himself to save his wife. It's some crazy stuff and it's about to get even weirder, but first, let's finish chapter 4 with Agent Nightingale arresting us.
That's right, James Joyce. It's your fault and you're gonna pay for it.
Finally, the plot is picking up the pace again after a slow chapter 2 and 3. And I must say that chapters 5 and 6 are completely focused on wrapping up the story with some intense gameplay sections and some tougher encounters. So, Barry and Alan wake up inside a jail cell, hangover from the moonshine they drank back at Anderson's farm. Moments later, Sarah and Nightingale appear, and the agent now seems to have proof about Alan's involvement in all of the weird things that were happening because he read the script. He knew about the story so much that at some point he had a deja vu that made him realize that he had read about the exact moment that was happening. But as he was figuring something out, the Dark Presence storms into the building and captures him. Now, this is also one of my favorite sections after the farm, where we need to get to the helicopter to reach Cynthia. But to get there, we need to cross the entire town. It's a really intense section, but one of the easiest ones when you realize that, compared to the kidnapper, Sarah was super overpowered. She carries a shotgun and has pinpoint accuracy, killing most of the enemies before you even think of doing so. She's a really good companion that makes this section much more enjoyable, and of course, we get some extra help at some point from the Eye of Mordor himself.
Did you call 911?
Guess that one saw the light, huh? You didn't like that one? A tough audience. Well, I got plenty more.
By the way, if the game had a headlamp as an item, it would be a really OP one.
See this headlamp? It's like a superpower. I can just look at one of those things and they die. It's my flaming Eye of Mordor.
Hey, I want a headlamp.
We finally get to the chopper, and now another holdout section. But this time, you have so much at your disposal. Rifles, flares, flashbangs, environmental lights, gas cans, everything to obliterate any horde of Taken. This is a really enjoyable section as well. And overall, in this section of the town, you feel really powerful, especially with all the weaponry. However, it's lost right in the next section after you get to the chopper, but Alan has to make a forced landing. Here's another thing that bothers me a bit and shows how the game quite doesn't know what it wants to be. Again, upon landing, we lost our gear, only having a revolver with just a few bullets. To make things worse, the game spawns a bunch of enemies, making this section really tense as you really realize the lack of resources. However, this tension doesn't last long as you find an ammo cache that has infinite ammo. I really don't like how the game presents this really cool situation and immediately backs off, giving the player a bunch of resources. I know this is an action thriller, not a survival horror, but sometimes you feel that the game kind of wants to lean towards it. So the power plant is a really simple, short and cool section where you can use those cables to electrify enemies. It is a really cool, unique mechanic. Again, the game uses the environment to change the pace of the combat a little bit. So here we finally find Cynthia, and now the plot gets revealed, so I will try to make my best attempt to explain everything, so play close attention. Cynthia is the lady who was warning Alan about the darkness back at the diner at the start of the game. She's also the Lady of the Light in the song from the Old Gods of Asgard. And also she was the one leaving us messages and supplies throughout the entire game with the invisible yellow paint. So back in the 70s, Cynthia knew Zane and Barbara. She had a crush on Zane, which is why she was so obsessed with him. After Barbara had the incident, Zane basically did the same thing as Alan and started trying to write Barbara back, like Alan is doing with Alice. However, Zane succeeded, but when Barbara came back, it was not her anymore. It was the dark presence, as we learned throughout the game, that took Barbara's Jagger body and used as a vessel. So after Cauldron Lake incident, Zane needed insurance. For that, he used Cynthia, but it's not clear if Zane wrote Cynthia or literally asked her for help, because at one point Cynthia says that we are characters in a story. So I understand that Zane wrote Alan and Cynthia at this point so he could have a failsafe. As Zane realized the mistake he made, he wrote a shoebox, and everything that was in it could never be written out of existence. So if he dies or disappears, someone could find it. That's why we arrived here at the power plant. Cynthia had built the well-lit room, which is a safe that was keeping Zane's shoebox. Before I continue, fuck this section. Let's continue. Now, this is the most confusing part at this point. We don't exactly know how things actually went, but we have a few theories. But before I explain them, I will let this cutscene play.
Take it, and I won't need to worry about the room anymore, because 6 and 33 and 118 need changing soon, and I don't want to climb up the ladder to change them because it's very late, and I'm tired. And if you take it, I won't have to do that anymore.
The page was autobiographical, a memory from my childhood. But I didn't write this. It was a page written by Thomas Zane. None of them were supposed to exist anymore.
Alan, 7 years old, would fight sleep to the bitter end. When he did sleep, he soon woke up, screaming, the nightmares fresh in his mind. One evening, his mother, sitting by his bed, offered him an old light switch. She called it the clicker, and flicking the switch would turn on a magical light that would drive the beast away. To imbue the talisman with all possible power, she added that it had been given to her by Alan's father. Alan never knew him, and anything of his took on mythical proportions in his mind. With the clicker firmly in his hand, Alan finally slept like a baby. Now, almost 30 years later, Alan thought of this as he stood on the rim of Cauldron Lake, the clicker in his hand. He took a deep breath and jumped.
My mind swirled. I'd given the clicker to Alice, yet it was here. Zane had written it into existence in a story I had written.
So, do you remember the clicker that Alan gave to Alice in chapter 2? Well, it is the same clicker. So basically, we have two options for this. Either Zane wrote Alan Wake that also wrote the clicker as a failsafe so Alan could kill the dark presence, or Alan wrote Thomas Zane that wrote Alan Wake, or even Alan wrote that Thomas wrote Alan's Wake mom giving him the clicker. For now, we have many possibilities that might be answered in the next game, but for now, we have the clicker and we need to use it to kill the dark presence. And of course, because Alan used it, the night turned to day, and now we need to drive all the way back to Cauldron Lake so we can save Alice. We are now in chapter 6, which is a really short section. We are all by ourselves, and as I already mentioned, we need to drive all the way back to Cauldron Lake. Yes, they really like to use the driving mechanic in this chapter, sadly. But before that, we have another flashback section that I have to mention because we get to watch a television show where we can see the live-action actor playing Alan Wake in the talk show alongside Sam Lake making his iconic Max Payne face. I love this so freaking much.
Two of you out there who haven't bought it yet. Ladies and gentlemen, that's all we have for you tonight. I want to thank all our guests for the evening. Alan Wake, Sam Lake. Once more, do the face for his Sam.
Here we can see that Alan was suffering a lot from drinking problems as he was getting fed up with his work and the success of his last book. So after that, Alan understands why he needs to go back. The last page of the script is in the typewriter and he needs to read before continuing the story, and he needs to do it all by himself. So he says goodbye to all of his friends and he makes his last stand against the dark presence. I really like the vibe that this part of the game has, but I feel the ending is a bit out of the blue. I will explain what happened before I conclude this train of thought. As we go back to Cauldron Lake, everything is pure chaos. Despite using the clicker to turn the night to day, we still have to traverse a section where the dark presence is so strong that it remains dark, despite Alan having used the clicker. While we are driving to the lake, we encounter those jump scares that happen quite often and use the same scare every time. So in the final stages, it becomes really boring and a bit funny.
Never loved you.
We also face hordes of Taken and encounter some really weird physics. The game basically throws everything at you. Crows, chainsaw guys, and even another bulldozer. And it all ends in a boss fight against a tornado? I don't know if I can consider this a boss fight because I just need to... God damn it, game! I just need to shoot flares at the core of the tornado and that's it. After that, the tornado and the chaos disappear and now we are facing the dark waters of the lake once again. Alan takes a deep breath and proceeds to dive into the depths of Cauldron Lake. Doing that, Alan wakes up inside a nightmare where the dark presence tries to toy with Alan using Alice's body as a bait. But this time, Alan doesn't fall for it and uses the flashlight to regain the clicker and burn away this nightmare.
must find your way to the cabin. If it stands in your way, it won't let you pass. It has no heart. It's filled with darkness. You must fill its heart with light. Don't mind him, he's Mr. Scott. Your friends will meet him when you're gone. Use the clicker.
So now we have more questions about this Mr. Scratch, but don't worry, I will leave at the next 2 videos where I cover the DLCs before we dive into Alan Wake 2. But for now, let's talk about the diver, also known as Thomas Zane, which is the vessel for the Bright Presence. Yes, here I'm also a bit confused about why the Bright Presence takes the form of Zane and also talks if it is him, especially when he says about taking my Barbara. I don't know if I missed something, but it is okay because the Bright Presence motive is simply to aid Alan fight the Dark Presence and guide him through the story, which he succeeded as we finally used our trusty flashlight to make her way back to the cabin, which after finally arriving, we finally confront Barbara and use the clicker to light up her heart, finally put an end to this.
Now you will never get her back. I am much older than you. Older than your first work of art. I will find a new face to wear. Someone else to dream me free.
I could feel Alice's presence close by. I understood what I had to do now. I knew how to write the ending to Departure. There's light and there's darkness. Cause and effect. There's guilt and there's atonement. But the scales always need to balance. Everything has a price. That's where Zane had gone wrong. There's a long journey through the night back into the light.
Alice? Alice? Oh no!
Or maybe we still have a long way to go.
It's not a lake. It's an ocean.
Alan, wake up.
And that was Alan Wake. I personally like the ending because of how iconic it is, but it really doesn't explain too well how Alan learned about the lake taking and giving and how he figured out everything. Was it written on Zane's page? The ending leaves a lot to interpretation, and some things we couldn't even understand. I'm saying this because this game was released 13 years ago. Imagine waiting for 13 years for a sequel, but personally, I would not care. I would get really excited. Despite its flaws, I'm super okay with the ending. And I appreciate this game even more after learning about how hard it was to pull all the pieces together. The missed deadlines, the tight budget, the struggle to find a clear vision. Despite all the effort, the game didn't perform well in sales at release. And sadly, that's the reason why it took so long for them to come up with a sequel. Remember the video from Sun Lake at the start of the video? Watching that after having played this game makes it even more heartbreaking. But they learned and they had their well-deserved comeback at the Game Awards, where Sun could 13 years later be a part of his own creation and even dance on the stage of the Game Awards as he won the awards for the sequel. It is a really inspiring story. Alan Wake is not only a project for a passionate team of developers, it is a metaphor for people who were in the dark place, with their own writer's block where they couldn't have any ideas on how the game should work, but they found a way. They wrote the story out of the dark place and rescued the company out of the depths of their cauldron lake. That's why I respect this game so much, and that's why, as the years pass, the fanbase never stops growing. If you never play Alan Wake, you should. It's a passion project, and it deserves to be experienced. The narrator woke up once again. He doesn't know for how long he was asleep. Only the darkness knows. The writer needs the narrator. They need to work together. So that's why I'm sending the manuscript pages so he can follow. He will follow. He has no choice. Neither do I. Find the clicker and the overlap. This is the only way out of here. The only way to me.
Venturing through the pages of the script can be quite deceiving. You choose wisely whom to trust, and even then, you can get lost between the lines. The interpretations can be many, but there's only one way the story will end. The script is not over. There's still so much to uncover. In Night Springs,